Welcome to the TDK Ventures podcast with Daniela Coutinho of the European CVC Bright Pixel Capital. In this podcast, we will be exploring the best practices in corporate venture capital to enable engagements between the startup companies the CVC invests in and the parent corporate. Welcome, Daniela, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Geetha, for having me here. I've actually started off in my journey as a biomedical engineer. So I have a PhD on bioengineering in particular that I've done in both in Portugal and in Boston. So across both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. I did my PhD, then I started off a postdoc. But then I realized that actually I liked science and innovation a lot, and I still do, of course. But I thought that at the time I would be more useful helping others doing research, advancing their scientific journey, their innovations, than doing the research by myself. So I moved to the consultancy world. During this time, my work was focused on supporting companies, so startups, large corporations, universities, business associations on their research and innovation strategies. So I designed the strategies with them, and then in some cases helped also in the implementation. During that process, I also prepared and supported the companies and the universities getting public funding, so from European institutions and from the national institutions as well. And then the opportunity came to join Bright Pixel Capital. At that time, we had a couple of majority investments and a very large team that supported those majority investments. So I joined the team specifically in supporting these majority companies also in their innovation strategies and accessing these public funding mechanisms. Fast forwarding a few years, I've started also working a lot on the risk management area of Bright Pixel as an investor. So I was working with the operational teams in managing the operational and the strategic risks of the company as a whole. And so I got more and more in contact with the VC activity, so with the investment team and all the portfolio companies at this stage, not only the majority companies, but also the minority investments that we had. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to join the investment team. That's how I got to this stage of being one of the members of the investment team at Bright Pixel. Focused specifically on cybersecurity area. I think that looking back, I was a researcher and I still am a bit inside. And I find a lot of similarities between academia and doing research and actually doing VC activity. I get the chance to be in contact daily with very innovative companies that really are at the forefront of their of innovation in their fields. So I find a lot of similarities in these two worlds.
Thank you so much. It's a very unique entry into the VC, CVC world. And funnily enough, kind of parallels a little bit of my own career into the CVC TDK Ventures ecosystem too. So it's very interesting to know. So to provide context to our viewers about Bright Pixel Capital, could you talk a little bit about the focus of the parent conglomerate and also what the focus of Bright Pixel itself is, and how old is the CVC?
Sure. So Bright Pixel Capital was envisioned by the group as the tech investment arm. So the group was created in 2015 initially with some of the majority companies that the group had on the tech area. And then
the group?
The group is Sonai Group. And Sonai Group is quite an old institution here in Portugal. It's a Portuguese multinational, and it really has a very diversified portfolio of business units, including in retail, fashion, food, retail, financial services, real estate, and also a telco operator in Portugal. So back in 2015, Bright Pixel Capital was created with a different branding, actually. And at that time, so majority companies that came out from the Sonai group, specifically from the telco area. Then life happened and things started to evolve. And from 2017, we started off with our venture activity. The first venture investments were made around that time. And at Bright Pixel, we invest in areas that are core to the group and in which we have already know-how, and for that we can support our portfolio companies. And the areas are natural retail tech, because retail is a huge area of Sonai Group, cybersecurity, and also infrastructure software. I am particularly focused on cybersecurity of these three verticals. And Bright Pixel Capital is financially driven. It's a CVC that is financially driven, and we have invested over 300 million euros in over 55 companies so far. At the moment, we have 42 active companies in the portfolio, and we have currently about 500 million of euros of capital available to invest in the next 5 years. In these three verticals, I've mentioned retail tech, infrastructure software, and cybersecurity. We invest in companies across the globe. So our portfolio companies are from the US, from New Zealand, from Israel, UK, and a few countries in Europe, including Portugal, Spain, France. And we have currently 3 unicorns in the portfolio. So we are very proud of all of our portfolio companies.
That's a pretty remarkable journey, considering you started in 2015 and having ups and downs in the economy, and this is really remarkable. You mentioned that you're financially driven, and so I was curious, what is the strategic benefit that the parent company sees from these investments? So other than the financial aspect, which is very important, I was just curious to know on the strategic side, what benefits does the mothership see from the investments in cutting edge areas in some of these deep tech startups?
So to invest in these areas, you really need to be aware of all the market trends, all the technology that is rapidly evolving these days worldwide. And so the investment team is really focused on making sure that we are on top of what's out and what are the market trends. And we do.
Let me just paraphrase that. So you mentioned the investment committee. So could you talk a little bit about the structure of the investment committee and what the process is?
Yes, sure. So our investment committee, we do plan the capital allocation with Sonai Group, and we have it approved by the group. But then we have some level of autonomy in the decision-making process. Our investment committee is made only of members of Bright Pixel Capital, from all the areas in which we invest in, and it is autonomous for assessing and deciding which investments we want to make. So we do invest from seed to Series B, and with different ticket sizes that can really vary from 1 to 10, but it's very flexible, so we can go above even if the deal makes sense. And we have autonomy to decide the ticket size and to decide the type of investment that we want to make. Circling back to the mother, to what the mother sees strategically and not only financially in what we do. So we do circle back all this information that we gather on the market, on the technologies, and we do try to share with the business units that could benefit from that information. We make sure that the group also has information of what is on the top of mind in terms of solutions that are in the market and that they can benefit from.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And so that actually leads me to the next question. So when you have autonomy in the portfolios that you invest in, you do keep the mothership informed about the technology areas and the cutting edge innovations that are happening in this area. You do not necessarily need a strategic mandate. You can invest even if that is not there. But assume that you are looking at an interesting portfolio company and your mothership is interested in it. How do you enable synergies in such a case? Is it mostly a focus from the BD teams in the mothership, or does RightPixel itself do anything to enable these conversations to move ahead?
We have both situations actually, and since we have 3 verticals and each vertical it has its own ecosystem with their own dynamics, but we do promote synergies with the business units from the corporates, and these synergies can occur before the investments or after the investments. Really often we do try to assess the products of the startup or the strategy that the startup has for the go-to-market strategy with someone from the business units that we understand knows the area, knows the product and the solution, and could be an end user of the solution. So before the investment, even before we decide to make the investments, we do have those type of check-ins. And when we have those check-ins, we find them very useful for both ends. From one side, the startup really has feedback on one potential end user. The corporate has information on really latest technology on that area, and we get feedback on the product from a potential end user. And from this interaction and from this bridge, sometimes there are commercial contracts that then go ahead. And these commercial contracts between the startup and the business unit can occur even if we don't make the investments. If the solution is useful for the business units, they can have a contract in any case. Even after investments, whenever this interaction doesn't occur before the investment, after the investment, we do try to also make these bridges. We present the portfolio companies in different forums within the group. And whenever we know that the group has a specific challenge that one of our companies can solve, we again present the company. So we really promote this interaction between the corporate and the startups that we invest in.
Thank you. So actually, I wanted to double down on a couple of things you said. So one of the things you said was you don't necessarily have to invest in the startup for it to engage with the parent. And this makes perfect sense because of the hundreds of startups that may be coming your way. Especially if you're a financially focused investor, you may be able to invest only in a handful of them, but there may be others that may actually be a far better fit with the parent, although it may not be an investment focus for you. Exactly. Could you talk a little bit about that? And the second thing you mentioned is that even after the investment, if there is a need from the parent, and they're looking for help in a certain technical area, and one of your portfolios is able to bridge that, you enable the discussion. So on that aspect too, could you elaborate a little bit? So is there a champion in the area inside the parent company that, because for any such engagement, what we have realized is that you really need a lead person. There has to be an interested party to move these things forward. the startups may be in different parts of the world. There can be cultural differences. They may not be fully aware of how the parent operates. And so there has to be a champion, either from the corporate or from the parent, to make these things happen. So if you could elaborate on these two things, I think it would be very helpful.
Sure. So maybe starting off with the last one, actually, we do have people in specific areas within the different business units we go to whenever we have a specific company that we want to present. So specifically in the cybersecurity area, we know which person is responsible for the area in each of the business units, and then we reach out to them specifically. Of course, this has the disadvantage that if a person leaves, then we don't have that bridge. I think that within our group, that is somehow we have that solved somehow, because we have then different transversal groups that are across the different business units, in which we can share best practices and we can share experiences. And cybersecurity, in my case, is one of the groups. Even if a specific person of a business unit leaves the company or changes role, then we can easily still have that contact with a new person and be able to have that interaction with the groups and of the business units. We do try to still have this contact. And going back to the first question was regarding having a business contract still, even though if we don't advance with the investment. That is absolutely true. A company can have a good product, a company can have a good solution and provide a good deployment of the solution, but still, for some reason, in terms of the market dynamics, not be a good investment. There have been some situations where we made a bridge, we don't make the investment, but the solution is still assessed to be a solution to be acquired, or a service to be acquired. So that does happen. Fortunately, when the majority of the cases, we do end up investing in the companies as well, but that happens as well. Just an additional note, we do try to be involved in the first conversation. So we don't only make the bridge and let things happen. So we are involved in the first and second meetings to make sure that, as you were saying, that there are no misunderstandings or miscommunications, because since we work with companies that are across the world, with different time zones, with different ways of working, it is very important to make sure that at the beginning there's no constraint in the relationship.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions. So you mentioned 55 portfolio companies that you've invested in, and 42 that are active currently.
Exactly.
How do you track these engagements over time? How do you get an assessment of how the engagement is going, whether there is an issue, it is stuck, and somebody needs to help it move it forward? It could be from the parent, it could be from the investment team, from the Brightpix CVC team. So I'm just curious, when you have such a large number of portfolios, how do you track these?
Mm-hmm. Again, we do have a large portfolio, but we have 3 verticals, and each vertical has its own team. And each person of the team tracks a number of companies, a specific number of companies. So you end up having X companies per person in a manageable way. So what we do try to do is each person from the investment team that then is part of the board or accompanies somehow the startup, makes sure that from time to time he or she knows what is the status of the interaction with the person of the group. So we have that information from that end, and And on the other hand, coming back again to the cybersecurity area, for instance, as an example, so we are 4 members and we do try to interact with the pivots of the group. And again, in this context, we also try to assess with the group how the interaction is going with the startup. So we go both ways. It's more of an informal way of going. It's not that we have checkpoints, let's say, in which we need to assess how things are. So we go and we, in these informal connections, we assess how things are going. And then what we do actually is then we have a support team. Besides the investment team, we have a support team, and the support team is financial, HR, tax, and legal. And this support team also helps somehow summarizing these interactions with the group. So we go one layer up and we kind of report, or not in a formal way, but we do aggregate all the interactions that we have with the group. And this support team helps us aggregate these interactions from the 3 verticals.
That's a very good practice and is becoming the best practice in the CVC industry, where you have the investment team and maybe a little bit of the engagement team, so the support, and then there could also be all of the other kind of support that a startup may not have the wherewithal to help themselves, such as financial, legal. So it's becoming a best practice within the CVC, and I'm coming across multiple CVCs that have these support systems in place. Coming to your engagements with the parents, could you elaborate a little bit on how the startups engage with the parent when the technology is, say, new and you invest in seed and Series A companies also, which may not have a product out there yet, and because they are in the startup phase. So in these cases, how do you enable the, say, a JDA or a pilot with the parent, and who typically pays for them? Do the startups and the parent bear their own costs, or is there some kind of a cost sharing? Anything you can share along these lines would be helpful.
We actually do try to invest in companies that have some kind of product validation already and some traction. So already someone validated the products. If the technology is really new and we think that still, it's always difficult to be an end user of a solution that is totally new in a corporate, right? Enterprises have more of anticorps. It's not as easy to adopt a solution that wasn't validated by someone else. So in our case, since we tend to invest in companies that have already validated the products somehow, whenever a solution is tested by the group, is already in a more advanced stage, more on a POC, or more in a more advanced stage than a pilot or a design partner. So our company usually doesn't work as a design partner for products of companies we invest in.
I see. Could you also throw some light on, because it's a conglomerate, your parent is a conglomerate, and they may have many channel partners. So do the portfolio companies that you invest in also have access to these channel partners, and you enable collaborations with these channel partners beyond the parent?
So the same way as we establish the connections with our parent company and with specific people from the business units, we also have an extended network of partners, of experts, and some of them are partners of the conglomerates, so the group. Others aren't related at all, but we do have an extended network, and we also establish contacts and bridges between the startups and this extended network. I would say that the business units of the conglomerates are family members, so it's easier to reach out to them. But one of the efforts of the investment team is really to build also this extended network besides the network that we have within the group. And the way we work is very similar to the way we work with the business units of the group. So we establish the bridges. If a commercial contract happens to take place, that's great. If it doesn't, it's great anyway. But we have a similar way to go about than we do for the business units of the group.
That's interesting. In your experience in the cybersecurity area, have you found that it is easier to engage with the parent, or is it easier to engage with the channel partners? I was just curious.
Cybersecurity is transversal, right? So it's something that it's needed for all of the business that the group has. So we find it very easy actually to be able to interact with the business unit. So we do have inbound interest from the business unit to get to know our portfolio companies, to know a specific technology, to understand what we know about a specific segment within cybersecurity. So we do have that inbound interest from the group.
And in your opinion, what value does this partnership, either with the parent or with the channel, bring to the portfolio company? You had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast that you had worked in risks. From a risk perspective, do these discussions and collaborations with the partner, the parent, and with the channel partner reduce risk for the startup? Because it's one of the crucial things that the startups need to solve if they have to scale and be successful. So if you could shed some light on that, it'd be great.
Of course. So I think it's twofold actually. So on one hand, whenever we make the contacts, even before the investments or even after, really, we do try to have feedback from the partner or the person from the business unit on the company, or either on the product market fit or the go-to-market strategy, and give back that feedback to the startup. So it's a constructive feedback that the company can take, the startup can take, and use it to improve whatever needs to be improved. So we do try to have always that angle in the first meeting. And of course, the best thing that can happen is that a commercial contract is established, because that's good on both sides. On one hand, it really helps the startup grow, scale, have an additional customer that is an enterprise, that is a large customer, then that has validated the product. So it is very good for the startup. And on the other hand, we invest in companies we believe in, of course. So we are glad that the business units are able to work with that specific solution that company offers. So we think that it has these two sides, that both sides can benefit, really.
Absolutely. And you spoke about commercial contracts, right? In your experience, how long are these contracts? Do they extend over multiple years, multiple months? I was just curious to know. Once you have enabled it, startup life, you said you had 3 unicorns. We'll come to that in a little bit, but your engagement may be like 8 to 9 years before the startup goes for an exit of some kind. It's in the deep tech space. And do these commercial contracts also take that kind of a duration?
It really depends a lot. So we do invest mainly in SaaS companies. So the contracts tend to be 1 year plus minimum, so not below. But it really depends on the company. So again, we invest in 3 different verticals, and each vertical has different dynamics. Even within cybersecurity, we have different segments, and each segment has its own specificities. But the contracts tend to be rather longer than shorter. Again, in the corporate and in such a large conglomerate, things also move around and change. So some companies are merged, and then the solutions that they had don't make sense anymore. So there's a lot of moves around. So I can't say for sure that contracts are for the 8 years that you were mentioning, the 9 or shorter periods, but what they tend to be is longer than 1 year, because it's usually the minimum contract duration.
Okay. And tell us about your 3 unicorns if you can. It's so wonderful to have not 1 but 3.
Yes, we have.
You said you mentioned you had 3 verticals, so are they all in the same vertical? They are in different verticals?
2 of them are actually on the cybersecurity area. Maybe I would highlight Arctic Wolf. So Arctic Wolf, it's actually one of our first investments that we made back in 2017, and it's a company that is based in the US. The other 2 are actually were initially based in Portugal. Now I'm actually not sure. But Arctic Wolf is on the cybersecurity area. It's a managed service company, and we invested really early on in the stage, in an early stage of the company, and now it's quite a large company, a very successful one. But we are happy with all our companies, even if they are not unicorns. So yeah, we are very happy with our portfolio companies.
Thank you, Daniela. That was a great sharing of insights through your career as a researcher and engaging with government organizations to enable university and company funding. And from there, your path into the CVC. Is there any best practices or golden nuggets you would like to share with the CVC community, especially as a woman in the deep tech CVC, and also as a researcher that has come into the CVC fold, both of which are not all that common? Anything that you can say that can inspire others that are considering such a path?
Sure. I think that academics or researchers are always passionate about knowing how things work and knowing more about everything, really. And I think that's a key asset in this area, especially in the deep tech areas. In particular, I'm looking at cybersecurity. You really need to know about the technologies to be able to really add value to the company. So I think that's something that I bring from my time as a researcher from the scientific area is the willing and the desire to really know more. And I think that's something that needs to be present in your daily life, in yourself, to be able to succeed in VC in general and in CVC, in the CVC in particular. I would say that's one of the things that I find very useful as a CVC is that I think that CVC professionals are very uniquely positioned in terms of the network. We do need to still network with the other VCs, with other CVCs, with startups, and really with all the ecosystem. But at the same time, we have a kind of an advantage because we have really close by in the same building, in the building next to us, people that are really knowledgeable about the area, either as end users or also as developers of similar solutions. I think that CVCs are professionals are very well positioned and have a unique position in that sense in terms of networking. And I would say that's the best advice I would say is to really enjoy what you're doing, because if you enjoy what you're doing, you will succeed in what you're doing. So I think that's the best advice that I can give.
That is truly a golden nugget. If you enjoy what you're doing, you will be curious enough to learn about new things. So learning about your own PhD was in material science, nanomaterials, and bio-related fields. And now you're investing in cybersecurity. How did you make that shift? It's, of course, your scientific training, but just tell us a little bit about that.
I think that life took me to this stage. It was a mix of random events, I would say. The group had built a large player on cybersecurity and in Europe, and I was fortunate to work very closely with the R&D teams of that large player on cybersecurity. I get to be involved in risk management, specifically also on cyber risk management, so getting to know more and more about the area. And currently, it's not that I use my knowledge on nanomaterials and regenerative medicine on my daily life, because I don't. But I think that the processes of thinking, the way we need to structure our thinking in doing research is very useful in this process of VC. The willingness and the desire to really go deep in the knowledge and know more about how things work, it's a very important skill to have while doing VC.
Absolutely. So that's a great takeaway to our listeners, that even if you're an expert in one particular area, it's the training that goes into that expertise that can be translatable to other areas. Because especially if you are in a VC or CVC world, even if you are an expert in a particular subject, that area's technical focus is going to change with time. So it is
Of
all
course.
training that is enabling you to be a researcher is what you later apply.
Exactly.
Yes. So thank you, Daniela. This was a wonderful
Thank you, Geetha.
conversation, and I hope our listeners have a good takeaway from this, and really appreciate your time and your sharing of your knowledge.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and glad to have passed this couple of minutes now with you, sharing some thoughts on CVC world.